So we got O'Malley versus Sterling, Zhang Weili versus Amanda Lemos, Kevin Lee versus Fakhretdinov, and many other fights announced, as well as UFC being announced to return to Sydney for UFC 293. So we're going to start off with that. Just yesterday, got announced that the UFC 293 is going to be held in Sydney, Australia on September 10th, and Israel Adesanya is going to be fighting the winner of Robert Whittaker and Dricus du Plessis, most likely, on that card as the main event. Hopefully, they can get a bunch of other good fights on that card. Hopefully, Volkanovski, maybe Jack Della Maddalena, all those Aussie guys, Kiwi guys as well, that are on International Fight Week in July. Hopefully, they can all turn around and fight in that Australia card, and that'll be great to watch. I plan on going as well, so I'll cover that when I'm there. But that's a great announcement for Australian fans as well. Obviously, Perth, UFC 284 was a great card, Volkanovski versus Makhachev. And now, just 7 months later in September, they're coming back. They obviously saw how big it was over here, and the Australian fans have been asking for another card in Sydney or Melbourne, and we're going to get it in Sydney. That's great news. Moving on to Sean O'Malley versus Aljamain Sterling was announced the other day when Dana White made the announcement for UFC 291. Obviously, also announced the main and co-main event of UFC 292 in Boston in August. So Sean O'Malley is going to be fighting Aljamain Sterling as the main event of that card. We obviously didn't know there was some talks of Yuri Prohaska and Jamall Hill. Yuri's not ready, so these guys are going to be taking the main event. So it's back-to-back main events for Aljamain Sterling and the first main event and first title fight for Sean O'Malley. Obviously, we saw in the Peter Yan fight, striking one of the best in the division, but he did struggle with the wrestling and the grappling of Peter Yan, which made that much more of a competitive fight. Aljamain obviously has his strength in the grappling. He's taken down everyone he's fought. He's taken down Cejudo, Yan, Dillashaw, Sandhagen, and gotten submissions against Sandhagen and other top-level fighters as well. I do see Aljamain Sterling winning this fight by a submission in the first or second round. I think he'll get a rear naked choke. I think the grappling edge is just a bit too big, and I think Sean O'Malley's build is really disadvantages him as well in this fight. Obviously, Cejudo was able to stuff the takedowns, not just because of his wrestling, his Olympic level wrestling, but I think the build as well, the structure of fighters makes it easier or harder to get taken down. So I think we're going to see Aljamain be able to leverage Sean a lot easier, be able to take him down, grab onto the legs, longer legs to grab onto as well, and control him on the ground easier. And I think he'll get the back and submit him. Obviously, Sean O'Malley's striking is not to be underestimated. That's his way to victory here, is to stop any takedowns and knock Aljamain out on the feet, which I think he would be looking to do with maybe a knee or an uppercut up the middle as Sterling comes in for a takedown. But overall, I just don't think. I think Aljo's in his prime right now. He's looking really good in his last few fights. Obviously, been underestimated after the first Yan fight, even the second Yan fight, the Dillashaw fight. But this fight with Cejudo really just put a stamp on it. You cannot underestimate Aljamain Sterling anymore. He's a legitimate champion in the bantamweight division, and I think he's going to get this third title defense here against Sean O'Malley. I think O'Malley, obviously, the striking is his way to win, but like I just don't think right now is his time. I think he's young, he's in his late 20s, but he's not in that same kind of prime as Aljamain Sterling. He hasn't really hit that stride yet. Obviously, the win over Peter Yan really boosted his name, but he hasn't really been in that top 10 for as long as you'd want to see that high level competition. Hasn't gone up against a jiu-jitsu specialist as well. Aljamain Sterling's going to be the first real grappling heavy jiu-jitsu fighter that he's going to be facing that's going to press takedowns relentlessly. Yan took him down easily, and I don't see that that's not a good look for me when you're fighting Aljamain Sterling, who I think is a better offensive wrestler than Peter Yan. So I think Aljo's going to get takedowns early, and I think he'll submit him quite easily. I think we haven't seen, obviously, O'Malley, we know he's got jiu-jitsu, but we just haven't seen it as much in MMA. But yeah, I think Aljo is going to win this fight by a first round submission. Sean really, his only way to win is to stuff the takedowns or just knock him out before he even shoots the takedown. Maybe the speed obviously will lie with O'Malley. The striking advantage heavily in Sean's favour. He's a much better striker, much quicker, much more power as well. More pop on his shots, and he puts the combinations together better than a lot of people in that division. So that is his way to win if he's going to. But I just see Aljamain taking him down, avoiding the early offense from Sean. We could see O'Malley just come out with just punches and bunches and just like trying to just fluster him and drown him early. But I think Aljo's got enough high level experience, obviously, as the champion to deal with that. And I think he's used to people throwing punches at his face. He's used to barrages of punches. He's used to people that hit hard as well. He's fought PDR and he hits hard as well. And he's fought Corey Sandhagen as well. The fight didn't last very long, obviously. Aljamain got the first round submission, but he really put the pressure on Corey, which was something that was quite unexpected, and got the round one submission. And I think that's quite similar to how this fight with Sean O'Malley is going to go. I think even if he doesn't get him down on the initial takedown, I think we're going to see Aljamain take the back in a scramble or even on the feet. He could even jump on the back. He just really needs any sort of physical connection. Like once he's made connection with O'Malley, I think he's just going to grab onto him and it'll be over from there. I don't think Sean has faced that opponent to really deal with that right now. I could be wrong. I think many people want Sean to win, as do I. I think it's much more interesting for the division as well, since Aljamain has stated numerous times after this fight he is planning on moving up if he wins and fighting Volkanovski, which I think he will lose quite decisively if he does that. But just leave. I don't like vacant belts. I don't. I want there to be a champion at all times. So I think if Sean wins here, becomes the champion, then we can see more of a flow in the division, obviously, and then other contenders can fight rather than if Aljamain goes up. He says once he goes up, he's not coming back down. So if he says he goes up and fights Volkanovski, win or lose, vacates the bantamweight belt, he said he will. So that just means we're just going to get a vacant title fight between like Merab and O'Malley, or Merab and Sandhagen, or Merab and Umar, maybe. I don't know. But just vacant belts, they don't mean the same thing. And obviously it's a pretty common conception that if you win a vacant belt, you have to defend it. I think if you have to beat the champion, or if you don't beat a champion, you then have to defend the belt if you win a vacant belt. So I think that's just going to create some kind of sense of illegitimacy around the title for the first time it's won and defended. But we'll see what happens. I think Aljamain's going to win. But moving on to the co-main event that got announced for that card, we got Zhang Weili coming back since November for the first time since November, and she's going to be fighting Amanda Lemos. Obviously, after Yan Xiaonan got the round one KO over Jessica Andrade, we weren't too sure who was going to be getting the title shot, but it's been announced to be Lemos. Maybe they are saving Xiaonan for a China card, maybe to do in China. Obviously, her and Weili, both from China. But Lemos, she was talked about as the number one contender before Xiaonan got that KO. So it makes sense. I'm going to be picking Weili to win with high confidence. I think she's at a different level in her career to anyone else right now. I think we saw her bully on we saw Andrade bullied Lemos and got that standing arm triangle finish, which was just a strength based submission, and we just saw her kind of fold Lemos, and she just didn't have the strength or technique to deal with that. I think as well. Weili, obviously, she KO'd Andrade in the first round. I think her striking is better than everyone's in the division. I think she's just so much stronger and physically stronger, mentally stronger, I think, as well. She got to the title, obviously. She won the title against and defended against Jędrzejczyk, and then lost to Rose Namajunas, and then lost in a rematch, a lot closer by decision. But then she obviously beat Carla Esparza very dominantly last November at UFC 281. and I think she's really just hit her stride now. I'm not sure how old she is. I think she's 30, in her 30s. Um, but she's not past her prime in any means. I think she's really coming into her prime now. I think she's got a lot more confidence, winning the belt in dominant fashion as well. And obviously, I think she's put that Rose Namajunas losses behind her, and I don't think she's going to be facing her again. I think she can look forward against new challengers like Lemos, like Zhang, like maybe a Suarez if she comes back as well, and many other women coming up in that 115-pound division. I think Weili is going to win by, I think, a TKO, or maybe a submission like we saw with Carla Esparza. I think she's just going to put hands on her early. She hits harder than anyone in division by far. She's got some of the best striking in the division, maybe only behind Rose. But even then, that second fight was a lot closer, so it's hard to tell. Um, so yeah, I don't see much of a way for Lemos to win. She might be quicker, but I don't think she has the power to really hurt Weili and put her down. Obviously, coming off a win over Marina Rodriguez by a TKO. Weird finish though. It was a standing TKO. Kind of froze Marina, but didn't put her down or rock her. She was just frozen and didn't really have the ability to throw back. I don't think we're going to see that with Weili. I think Weili is a much more gritty fighter, and she'll bite down on the mouthpiece. We saw with Joanna. She can go to war. She can dig deep. We haven't seen that from Lemos yet. So I think Weili is going to win by within 3 rounds by a KO or submission. I'm not sure, but talk about that fight more when we get to it. Moving on, we've got Rinat Fakhretdinov versus Kevin Lee coming back, obviously, to the UFC for the first time in quite a while, following, I think it was the Daniel Rodriguez fight. Obviously, we fought outside UFC and Eagle FC as well. Coming back now, and I don't think he's picked the right fight to come back to. This fight is on the July 1st card, the Strickland versus Abbas Magomedov card. And that's a good card as well. We've got Shavkat versus Grant Dawson on there as well, and a few other good fights. I don't see Kevin Lee winning this. I think he's going to get bullied in the wrestling. I think he's going to get bullied in the grappling department. Rinat Fakhretdinov looked really good against Brian Battle. Dominated him, won clearly. And just really looked good. And I don't think Kevin Lee, I think he's past his prime, I believe. I think we saw his prime, obviously, while he was still in the UFC. He's fought many of those guys there, obviously, mainly being like Tony Ferguson when he fought for that interim title and lost. But he had success in that fight. So Kevin Lee is a very good fighter. I don't think he's quite at that top level, and I think when we saw he was coming back to the UFC, I don't think anyone was like Kevin Lee making a run at the belt. I think they're more like Kevin Lee back. This will be fun. We can have some fun fights, and he can fight some of those guys that were there when he was there. But I don't think anyone really saw him becoming a top contender again, especially at 170. Obviously, he fought most of his career at 155, lost to like Oliveira as well. Moved up, lost to Daniel Rodriguez. So I don't see him winning. I think Rinat is much better in the wrestling. Obviously, you can tell by his last name. He's got that OV. He's from that area, Russia kind of area as well. Dagestanis. You know what their strengths are. You know what you're in for when you fight them. And I think it'll be a grappling masterclass from Rinat Fakhretdinov. I think he'll win a dominant decision, or maybe get a sub or a TKO due to ground strikes here. So I don't think it's the best fight for Kevin Lee. I think he should have gone for one of those different, more the well-known legends kind of names. I think he maybe thinks he's got a chance at the belt. I don't think he does. I think that's not a good matchup for him. I think should have gone with a striker. Should have gone with maybe like a Jim Miller or a Joe Lozon maybe, or maybe a Matt Brown even, Clay Guida, those kind of guys that are just there, not really looking at title fights or top contender fights. I don't think Kevin Lee will get there, and I think once he loses this fight, he might leave, or he might look just towards what I was saying with those kind of legends fights and just kind of build a resume based off just fun fights and well-known names in the sport. So I've got him losing this fight. I've got Rinat winning and moving on to a top 15 opponent. I think he could get after this. Or maybe if they get the same treatment as Ikram and Abbas, maybe he's looking at a top 10 opponent. I'm not sure, but I've got Rinat winning. Moving on, this was announced a few weeks ago and then got made official recently. We've got Jimmy Crute versus Alonzo Menifeild. It's the rematch. Obviously, they fought back at UFC 284 in Perth, went for a draw. That's why this fight's being ran back. It's quite unusual to see rematches of fights that are not for the belt. You don't usually see two fighters that aren't even in the top 10. Obviously, Crute is in the top 15. Menifeild is unranked. You don't really see those fighters rematch. Obviously, you want to see them progress in their careers, but the draw obviously made that case a lot more acceptable. And obviously, being the draw as well, they both called each other. They both well, not called each other out. They both kind of agreed to a rematch post fight back at UFC 284. Obviously, in that fight is what we're going to go off here. You don't really need to look anywhere else for the skills. We saw this play out already. Jimmy Crute, I believe, is a better fighter, but he's got a cardio issue. He's got a cardio issue. I'm just saying what I'm seeing, and I think we saw him obviously gas out a lot. He looked better in the first round against Alonzo, and then tired quickly, and the grappling kind of didn't work out. He was trying to strike with him, which was not his way to win with a big, powerful puncher like Menifeild. And obviously, almost, I think there was a 10-8. Yeah, there was a 10-8 for Menifeild, which is why it did end up being a draw. And then he won and then I think Crute won the third round, I believe, or the first and second, and one was a 10-8 for Menifeild, I believe, is what it was. So it's a good fight. This has been added to UFC 290, July 8th. That's the Volkanovski-Rodriguez card, International Fight Week. Stacked card, obviously. We've talked about it already. So many names on there. So many of those Australian guys fighting on there. Hopefully, all those guys like Crute as well with a win, turn around quick, and fight in Sydney as well, and get those home fans cheering for you in your next fight. As far as the prediction goes, I'll go with Jimmy Crute. I think Menifeild had the better of the fight. I think obviously if you come out of that fight and say who was not the winner, who did better, I think you got to say Menifeild. He had bigger moments. He hurt Crute more than Crute hurt him, and I think Crute he's young. I think he can make improvements. Obviously, we saw him that Anthony Smith fight where he did his leg. Unfortunate, but he was doing well and he was wrestling. He was grappling well, even on one leg. So I don't know why he didn't go to that wrestling, but I think that's something that he could make work in this fight, obviously. And I think that's what he should be doing if he wants to win. So I'm going to go with Jimmy Crute by submission or a decision. By a late sub, maybe, or a decision. Maybe a rear naked choke or an armbar. I think he'll get. Obviously, we saw him against Paul Craig. Submitted Paul Craig, one of the best jiu-jitsu fighters in the sport. And he was at that level. He was in that contendership level, and then just things didn't go his way. But I think he can, if he bounces back with a win here, he's looking towards a ranked, obviously, opponent. I think maybe a Reyes fight maybe could make sense for him in Sydney if he wins. If not, it's tough. You've got to go back down the rankings and work your way up from there. So yeah, moving on, we've got Dustin Jacoby versus Kennedy and Nzechukwu. It's a very good fight. This is going to be a striking match. Obviously, this is going to be great to watch on the feet. I'll just check right now. This is announced for August 5th fight night. So that's a fight night without a main event, but we've had a few fights announced for that card. As far as this fight goes, obviously we saw Nzechukwu recent win at UFC 288, and he looked very good. Obviously, Jacoby lost his recent fight. I believe it was to Albert Jurayev, if I'm not mistaken. And that was at a fairly recent card as well. So I'm going to be backing Nzechukwu to win. I think he's a better striker. I think he's more powerful. And I think he's got the ability to grit down, as we saw in the Olberg fight. And even in his most recent fight as well at UFC 288. Really grit down and yeah, just got that finish, obviously, in that fight. The elbows, he turned around really quickly and put the pressure back on his opponent, got the elbows, and finished him with that submission, the modified guillotine, I think it was, in the second round. Um, Jacoby, very good striker. He's a good striker, but I think he's just not quite as good or as powerful as Nzechukwu. So I'm going to take Nzechukwu to win by a second round KO, and then he'll be moving on to a top 15 opponent, in my opinion. It's what he deserves. Moving on, we've got Virna Jandiroba versus Tatiana Suarez. That was announced for, I'll just check, August 5th as well. So that's another fight for August 5th. I'm not sure. Is it a main event? No, it's not a main event. Okay. So yeah, Tatiana Suarez obviously made her comeback after a few years off, and she won by submission quite comfortably. Virna Jandiroba coming off the dominant decision win over Marina Rodriguez at UFC 288 as well. So it made sense to get Tatiana Suarez. Obviously, her return fight was at flyweight, but she did announce post-fight she wanted to move back down to strawweight and make a run at the title there. So I think that made sense. She said she wanted a top 5 opponent. I believe Virna is ranked number 5. Tatiana Suarez, I think, is ranked number 13 at strawweight, if I'm correct. So it's a good fight. The grappling, obviously, it's going to be a heavy grappling fight, I believe. I think Virna Jandiroba is probably stronger, I would say. I think Suarez has a bit better technique and probably better on the feet. I would say comfortably better on the feet. Jandiroba, though, possesses that control. Obviously, it's a hard fight to pick. I'll lean Suarez. I'll go by a decision. I think she'll win 29-28, maybe a split, a close fight. I think Virna Jandiroba is very underrated. I think people are very high on Suarez. They're saying she can be a champion. I don't disagree. I think she could become a champion. But I think Virna is really she's one to watch as well in that division. Obviously, she was number 9 and then fought number 5 Rodriguez and won dominantly. Obviously, people see decision, they see a grappling fight, and they don't really give much credit. But she did very well in that fight, so I think that she should earn some respect. And I think she shouldn't go into this fight with Suarez as a complete blowout underdog. I think this should be maybe minus 150, minus 200 maximum for Suarez. I think it's quite a close fight. I might change my prediction as we get closer. I'll have to rewatch a few of their recent fights. I'll rewatch Suarez's recent fight that she had, and then I'll make an official prediction, obviously, when that card comes around. A few other brief ones that I'll just run over really quickly. We've got Jack Jenkins versus Jamall Emmers announced for June 24th. That's the Josh Emmett versus Ilya Topuria card in Jacksonville. That's a stacked card, looking really good as well as a fight night. So many other names on there too. Obviously you've got Neil Magny, Philip Rowe. We've got many other fights on there as well. Trevor Peake as well, absolute wild man on there. So it's going to be a fun fight in front of a Jacksonville crowd. Obviously, last time they were down in Jacksonville was Volkanovski versus Zombie and Hamza versus Burns. We saw that crowd went absolutely nuts. They're a great crowd, and they love some fights. And they're going to see another good one here. Jack Jenkins, obviously Australian, fought at UFC 284, got the decision win very comfortably, looked impressive in that fight. New to the UFC, and obviously his grappling is serious. Jamall Emmers coming off the win over Ashkabov, I believe it was, on a fight night earlier this year in February. I can't exactly recall which card, but he was an underdog going into that Ashkabov fight. Ashkabov was making his debut, and I think it serves as a learning point to not just blindly trust fighters making their debut because they've got that OV name. Ashkabov, you'd think, dominant grappler, and he was outside the UFC, but turns out cans. He's a can crusher, and he got exposed by Jamall Emmers, who looked good in that fight. Not ridiculous, like nothing crazy. I think it was a decision win. So yeah, quite impressive win, and I think I'm gonna go with Jack Jenkins by a submission. I think he'll win a submission or a decision. Obviously the leg snapper is his name. He gets those heel hooks, knee bars. He's a force on the ground at featherweight. And I think he's one to watch out for. Obviously, with all these Aussie guys, again, doesn't need to be said. Win, turn around quick, and fight on that Sydney card as well. So hopefully, looking forward to seeing that one. Hopefully, a win for Jenkins will get him in front of his home crowd in Sydney. Moving on, another one. We've got Evan Elder versus Genaro Valdez for July 15th. That's a Hollyholm versus Marabrono silver card. I'm not going to go over it heaps. I'm going to pick Evan Elder by decision. Obviously, someone's always got to go. These two have both lost both of their fights in the UFC, so believe it or not, it's not an undefeated prospects fight. Evan Elder had a very good fight. He had a loss, but I think he lost by a cut. I think it was a TKO due to a cut stoppage. But it was a really exciting fight. I think fight of the night it was. Back on one of those earlier fight nights in the year. So I think he'll win by a decision or TKO. I'm just gonna check now who he fought. My apologies. But yeah, I'm going to pick him to win. I think he looked really good in his recent fight. Looked impressive on the feet. Yeah, looked good on the feet, and obviously lost because of the cut. He could not continue. Doctors called a stop to that fight. It was against Nazim Sadikov. So yeah, it was a really good fight, and he was hurting Sadikov in the fight as well. So I'm going to pick him to win. Moving on, we got just a few more quick ones to go over. We got Tanner Boser versus Aleksa Camur. I can't say. I'll be completely honest. I don't know Aleksa Camur. I know Tanner Boser. He had the recent loss to Ion Cutelaba. Apparently, Aleksa is 1-2 in the UFC. I'm gonna pick Boser. I'll do some research into the fight when it comes around. This is also the August 5th card, so we're getting some fight announcements for that one. I'll pick Boser by as of right now, I'll say a TKO. I will come to you with a change, obviously. Maybe when that August 5th card comes around, I'll do look a bit more into it. This was announced just today. So I'll go with Boser. One more. We got Zhalgas Zhumagulov versus Filipe Bunes. Bunes is making his debut fight champion in I think it's a Brazilian promotion. Yeah, Brazilian promotion making his debut. Zhalgas had the fight in May at UFC 288, got cancelled. I think it was against Santos, I believe. I might be wrong there. But yeah, had that fight cancelled. Before that, lost to Charles Johnson via a controversial decision, we'll say. I think he was not happy with that fight at all, with that decision. And he briefly retired, which I don't like. So Zhumagulov was going to fight Rafael Estevam. Estevam pulled out due to weight issues, so it wasn't an injury on Zhumagulov's side, which gives me a bit more confidence in him. I'll have to do some research into Bunes. I can't give you a proper prediction right now. I'll go Zhumagulov based off the fact that I know him and I'm seeing him fight. So I'll watch Bunes' fights outside the UFC and obviously come to you with an official prediction again when that card comes around. That's for June 17th, so that's coming up sooner in just under a month. That's on the Vittori versus Cannonier card. So that's good stuff. Yeah, I'll go Zhumagulov by a decision. Pick change may or may not come. One more. Vinc Pichel versus Benoit Saint-Denis, July 1st. That's on that Abbas versus Strickland card with Rinat versus Kevin Lee. I'll go with Benoit Saint-Denis. Vinc Pichel, I remember he's lost to Mark Madsen, who isn't good. And I think Benoit Saint-Denis is a much tougher fighter. So I'm going to pick him to win. Anything else? I don't believe. No, that's it. That's it for the recent fight announcements. Obviously, as well, UFC Sydney. Very excited. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know who you've got for all these matchups. Obviously, O'Malley, Sterling, and Zhang Lemos being the main one, and a few other quality fights on some fight nights to look forward to. Let me know what you think in the comments. Drop a like, and we'll see you in the next one. I might do a card builder for UFC Sydney, which I did on my Instagram, but I might do a video on that. So, alright, I'll see you guys.